Hey there everyone, welcome to the stream. Let's put on some background music while we're at it, you know what I mean? Oh, that's beautiful, that's gorgeous. Hello, 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 hello! How's everybody doing today? So, if y'all don't have any idea what I'm doing today, is I'm basically going over Subspecies. And I'm trying a different format because that means I can output greater production. Well, not greater production, but that means I can output content at a much better pace if I just stream it than if I were to make a video production out of it. This particular idea came about a week ago, and in a week I was about to prepare everything and pull up a decent argumentation. And the reason I'm doing the stream today is pretty simple. It's because YouTube Shorts are by far, YouTube Shorts are devoid of not an explanation necessarily, but they're devoid of the ability to rationalize a position above what most people know or what you're presented with. So it's very hard to be implicit within a YouTube short. You have to be quite explicit in your way of doing things, and in 60 seconds, argumenting for a single point is very hard. So what this video stands as right now is essentially an argumentation as to the goods, the grades, and the improvements you could add to potentially make the category of monster in Monster Hunter a better classification of monsters, and or how to improve their character design. And I'm going to be And a lot of people right now are pretty much asking the question, why do you call them character design and not creature design? Well, because a character design has some kind of story, some kind of history, some kind of ecology to tell. It has a background, it has a progression it needs to follow. So, the point I'm trying to make here is that character design isn't necessarily tied to creature design. And there are stories to tell, and I think some subspecies fail to recognize. And there are a lot of factors in game design, in just design in general, that it's all contextual to the context given. And what I want to do right now is I want to tell everybody, and I want to make a video about the context of what I think is better, what I think is for the worse, and why it's the case. Did we make the shot a little bit? Hold on. Just lessen the shot. It doesn't feel like I'm just full frame all the time. So, again, I'm making this because I want the production of the thing to be a little bit faster, and also, you know, just make sure everybody has some stuff to do in the meantime, and it doesn't take me a month to produce this. Takes me about a week, right? Not necessarily a work week, but just about a week, and we can talk about a subject, we can discuss over it, we can discuss it live, so if you have any points you'd like to rebuttal in the meantime, you are welcome to do so, because we're in a live context. Unfortunately, you guys won't have the privilege of being as prepared as I am, because I have a lot of things in front of me that can just help my point significantly more than if you were to just type it in chat, unfortunately. But I still want to give everybody this particular ability to refute my point. So if you have anything, we're going to disagree on some factors. That's a given. If you are making a stance, an opinion stance on anything, you are going to not 100% agree with a person. That is fully normal. So, without further ado, let's get right into what we would call, or at least what I would call, the subspecies of Monster Hunter. And, wait, where is it? The subspecies of Monster Hunter, right? God damn it. It keeps doing it. There you go. Subspecies of Monster Hunter. The goods, the greats, and the improvements. We'll talk about them in the next, well, I don't know, hour and a half maybe. We'll see. We'll see. I don't want to spend an absurd amount of time being here doing this, but we'll go over what I think is important, why it's important, and so on and so on. So, first things first. What is a subspecies? You gotta define, before anything else, you have to define what you think is a subspecies. Because if you don't know what a subspecies is in the concept of Monster Hunter, then that's kind of missing the point, right? So we have to talk about what a subspecies is and what it is defined as. If you don't, well, again, if we don't establish some sort of a base, then we'll never actually agree on anything, because we won't have a base standard to quote it as. So, what is an actual subspecies? What does it do? How does it compare to, say, variants or deviants or apexes of the Monster Hunter universe? And what could we potentially compare to as in a real life, right? Let's see. Well, first of all, we got two definitions that we can go by. We can either go by a real life definition, as in the scientific definition of a subspecies in real life, or we can go with the Monster Hunter definition, which comes with the art book, I believe. I believe the Monster Hunter definition comes from an art book that was released right around Worlds. Yeah, right around when Worlds was a thing, which would be 2018. So, let's start with the real-life definition, which is a subspecies is an aggregate of phenotypically similar populations of a species inhabiting a geographic subdivisions of the range of that species and differing taxonomically from other populations of that species. Those are very, very big words put in a very, very complicated sentences. Let's break it down. A subspecies is an aggregate of phenotypically similar populations of a species. So essentially, what is very physiologically similar of a population of a species inhabiting a geographic subdivision of a range, so you have a set marker of a territory, and you say that one is a subdivision, just a separate place, but within the same relative range of that species, and differing taxonomically from other populations of that species. They are physiologically different than the rest of the population. Very, very big words used there, but it's if you break it down, it sounds actually quite good. Because if you look into real life ecology, you start at what is called the kingdom. At the top, wait, actually you can probably pull up a picture. I can pull up a picture, right? I'll pull up a picture. Hold on. It's classification, essentially. Microphone. It's just classification, really. So let's go over animals classification. Where is it? Oh, there we go. That's pretty good. Let's open. Wait, why can I? Oh, no, goddamn it. Open a new tab. All right, there you go. Let's go over here. Let's go over here. There you go. So at the top, you have what is called the kingdom, the domain. Oh, actually, domain, then kingdom, then is it phylum? I think it's phylum. Then it goes into class, order, family, genus, and species. And under that would be subspecies, right? So a red fox is a species of animal. A subspecies of red fox would be red fox that are perhaps smaller or slightly bigger, but they can essentially just still breed with a red fox and live within the same continent, let's say, or the same literal part of a continent, but it looks slightly different. That's essentially what a species is, although there are some very, 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 very loose terming used to say what a species is in real life. Exceptions are massive things when it comes to argumentation in scientific literature in real life. So, let's look at the Monster Hunter definition, which would be: the guilds define subspecies as a population of monsters in which environment factors and adaptive evolution has caused a certain group of monsters to change or mutate over time, creating a subspecies. Although that is how the guild defines subspecies, there are some exceptions to that rule. Perhaps the biggest, the singular biggest exception is that subspecies Monster Hunter is quite loose with its definition. There are a lot of factors that go into what makes a subspecies, what makes a variant, what makes a rare species, and all the case. But essentially, what Monster Hunter tries to make sure it goes over is if it's something that has evolved over time, over a certain amount of generation, under specific environmental changes, that's a subspecies. So, if you look at it this way, then what that means to me is that subspecies in the Monster Hunter universe are far much more akin to what we call the genus, or the family pool, by the way. So, if we have to make a real life, comparison, right? A family would be something of animals would be something like a canine. A canine could be a wolf, it could be a fox, could be a dog, it could be many, many different types of canines exist all over the world, right? It could be a gray mane dog, I think. African dogs. There's lots of different canines. I think raccoons are canines, right? That's a family of animals. A genus of animals would be something like if I say, hey, tell me different species of bear. Now you'd be like, oh, okay, well, we got brown bears, we got polar bears, we have sun bears, we have pandas, which are kinds of bears, right? And now I'm describing species that fall under the category of genus. So in Monster Hunter terms, subspecies is evolutionary change that's still tied to that main species, which would be most closest to different types of species, which would be a genus of animal. At least that's how I view things, because that's how most are explained in their ecology. Again, there are There are very specific exceptions, but that's how it's defined. That is what a subspecies is. If we use those definitions. Again, similar language, but different context. For example, let me give you another example, you know, just for the sake of argumentation again. Let's go over to original slide. So, probably a big point of contention is dog breeds in real life are not subspecies. They're very close to being subspecies, but a big point of contention in the scientific community is that because it looks different doesn't mean it's a subspecies. It can just be an even deeper level of the animal classification system, right? So every dog breed is defined under the same Latin name, right? A better way to describe perhaps what a subspecies is in real life, and again, those rules play very fast and loose, unfortunately. That is how it goes. Contextual evidence can sometimes just be very fast and loose. But yeah, essentially, dog breeds just don't have enough genetic variation between them to classify them as subspecies between each other. That's just speciation. The bigger subspecies here would be that dogs would be a subspecies of wolves, because they can still and are still able to breed with wolves, creating hybrids. The same way that African elephants and Asian elephants can technically breed, right? They can create hybrids of that, but that doesn't necessarily define one as a subspecies of another, although you can definitely argue that. Again, scientific literature is very fast and loose with that kind of ruling, and you have to be extremely specific in your way of wording things. But essentially, the way I perceive it is, dogs are essentially a subspecies of wolf. Wolves live, well, let's be specific here, let's call them gray wolves, right? Let's use gray wolves as an example. Say that gray wolves and German shepherds, right? What are American breeds of dogs? Can somebody tell me any American breeds of dogs? Like, done in America? I don't know. I'm just using German shepherds, right? German shepherds and gray wolves can probably interbreed and create hybrids of the two, right? Probably. That's what makes them essentially still part of the same species. Although they look different, so you might classify them as subspecies. It's confusing, man. It's very confusing. Well, they live in a similar region, right? Gray wolves lives in the forest of North America. But, you know, if you let wild dogs go about in a forest, they live in a similar region, although they have a subsection of that forest to live on their own, right? Because you wouldn't want to interact with the wolf pack directly. So that's how I see it. Let's continue onward. In multi-artic context, as long as it isn't a change of a specific individual that can go under a generational lifespan, that's basically a subspecies, or what we like to call evolution. I got a picture for this, actually. I'll pull it up. It's gonna take me about a minute, so you'll have to excuse me on that. Image. Show me a new image. I have it already, don't worry. Alright. So, it's a pretty bare-bone explanation, but it is a pretty good one. As you can see, the base monster, let's call it the main species. You can see the subspecies on the upper left corner of your screen, and rare species, which are basically planet evolutions. And when we're talking about a lifespan generational change, I'm talking mostly about variance and deviance, which is a change that occurs during a lifetime, and genetic mutation during that lifetime. It can be just very... it's confusing, man, but it's not that bad once you understand what it actually is. Also, theoretically, you could classify tempered or untempered as variant depending how you want to look at it, but it gets complicated. For the sake of simplicity, let's just say that subspecies is an evolutionary change, although, again, there are plenty of exceptions, and it can be very confusing. So, for example, Diablos and Black Diablos. So I think most people are aware that Diablos is the main species of animal and that Black Diablos are just the female gender of Diablos when they enter heat. Female Diablos aren't black all the time, only when they enter heat, only when they're horny. So, you know, I wouldn't classify this as a subspecies, I'd just classify it as an individual change. In fact, I'd much rather classify this as a variant than as a subspecies. Well, you know, sometimes you just kind of stuck with the hands you've been given. So, again, Monster Hunter plays kind of fast and loose with its ruling also, although it's not that bad. If you look at Black Diablos shouldn't be a subspecies, right? It's not evolution, it's not an evolutionary change of a subset of a population like living away from the main species or specializing in a type of environment, right? Like Tigrex and Brute Tigrex. Brute Tigrex specialize in environment, and then Tigrex are a nomadic species, right? Black Diablos is just a female Diablos in heat. That should be a variant, that shouldn't be a subspecies. But because variants have to be a lifespan change, right? That they always have to retain that change, I think this is why they classified it as a subspecies. So, exceptions are possible, but still, if you want to be in very much simple down the argumentation to a base concept is, if they can, and excuse my language, if they can fuck and make babies, they're subspecies. If they can because they create horrible monsters and that'd be a mismatch, or what we humans call bestiality, then it's probably not a subspecies. So, again, another example of what a good subspecies is would be if a group of Emoldrons, right? Let's use Res as an example. Emoldrons is the main species of animals. They migrated to the lava caverns. Once they migrated to the lava caverns, what they did is they've adapted a subset of that population that went and probably migrated over or just were nomadic in that region, right? Just passed by. Over time, over generational time, as they created an evolutionary adaptation with their babies to be more efficient within that subsection of environment, right? So they created a subspecies. Very similar physiology, but different environmental adaptation. With that comes also physiological changes, but nowhere big as near as a completely different family of animals, or even genus. Again, if they can fuck, they're a subspecies. If they can fuck in between species, that is subspecies. If you really want to boil it down, and I know it's like the 4th time I'm saying this, but if they fuck, if they can fuck, that's a subspecies. Alright. Does it potentially mean that something like Roller Orange Bishaten and Bishaten can create hybrids? I don't know. Monster Hunter hasn't developed that idea yet, and I'm kind of glad it didn't. But that's kind of cool. Again, the other interesting factors is, I think, again, it relates far more to the genus. I think Monster Hunter recalls far much more the genus of animals than it does a natural classification of subspecies. Because if you're thinking about it, right, and I'll go back to the Emoldron example because I think it's a really good one. So these two don't live in the same environment at all. Emoldron lives in the flooded forest. Where else does it live? Shrine ruins? Does it live in another environment? Chad, can you help me on this one? Is Emoldron lives in the shrine ruins? It can live in the flood forest. Can it live in another environment? But the point is, they don't live in lava caverns. That's exclusive to Magmadron, which is Magma Emoldron, right? So they don't live in. If we were specific, they wouldn't live even in the same ballpark of a continent, or at least they'd be very separated apart within the same continents, right? So, and that's much closer to sandy plains. Thank you, thank you. But they live far far and away from each other, which would be far closer to what a genus would be. And I think we really, really, really need to put that into perspective, because a lot of people just... they don't take that into consideration, and I don't necessarily agree with that. So, Magmatron, right, again, lives very far away. Let's continue onwards. So here is the map of Monster Hunter. I've taken this from a Reddit user. Unfortunately, I do not remember its name, so my apologies on this one. If somebody can link back to him, I'd appreciate it. I would like to credit his work, unfortunately. I went a little bit fast to prepare for this stream. So, you can see the general location as to how things are separated. You can clearly see where there's a forest, where there's a desert, where there's a tundra, and when there's separation in between the islands, right? You can see that. So again, let's take the example of Magma Moldron, right? Let's go over to Kamura. Unfortunately, hold on. That should be better with the stream layout. Yeah, it's a little bit better. Okay. So in Kamura, the southest part is where you would find the Frost Island. The Shrine Ruins would be just above Kamura in the eastern part of the continent, and Lava Caverns would be in the western part of the continent. So regular Amoldron lives in the eastern portion of that island, continent, whatever you'd like to call it, and Magma Amoldron will live in the western portion. They are nowhere near each other, right? At least it take, I presume, days, if not weeks, of traveling to even get to those locations, right? And that's okay. That's a great differentiator, and there are major benefits to having such a system implemented in your game. It helps you by major amounts to differentiate everything. But that's the thing, they aren't treated as inter-regional populations, but rather extra-regional populations. They may be on the same continent, but they don't live anywhere near each other. And as much as people just flat out don't like it, classification for those sorts of things are pretty important to define as to what is what. And again, it depends on how you want to use it, or how you perceive it, and how you use it in which context. But the way I define it, well, I've just spent 20 minutes saying how I define it, so I think that's enough for now. So that was enough preamble. So what are the major benefits of something like this? Why would you want to include subspecies? If I was a game developer, why would I even think of including something such as subspecies in my game? Why would I bother to include subspecies in my video game? Well, there's a lot of factors to it. Believe me, Monster Hunter games are quite demanding in terms of department resources and development time. There's a reason why they split into two teams, because these games are big and they require a lot of efforts. Every game requires a lot of efforts. I'm not dissing any game developer for that. But if I was a game developer, why would I want to create a system like Subspecies? What are the major benefits? Well, I can think of a couple examples, but probably the biggest one is that one will never appear without the other, right? Pyroarachna Kodachi would not appear in the game if regular Arachna Kodachi was never in the game. You could say the same thing for Azur-Rathalos. Azur-Rathalos would never appear in the game if Rathalos wasn't there. That, in turn, creates plenty of diversity options for your game, so you can reuse certain fights and recontextualize them under certain new conditions to make them an entirely new fight, which games have done for decades now and has worked mostly beautifully. Mostly. There's some instances where that isn't that good, but we'll touch on that later on. What would be the second reason why you'd want to perhaps include such a system as subspecies? Well, excuse me, I'm eating. It's a little bit disgusting. Far less resource intensive. When you're creating a new monster, as a developer, I have to think about making a model. I have to think about rigging a skeleton. I have to think about its inspirations. What do we base it on? What animals do we take as base concept? How does it move? How does it define? How does it behave? How does it eat? How does it fit within the ecology? How does it fit within the power structure of Monster Hunter? How does it move? What is personality, behavioral system? I gotta create music for it. I gotta create AI for it. I have to code in a certain way. I have to create hit zones values. I have to make sure the hitboxes are fine. I have to test it. I have to do so many little things just to make one monster's work. Which is why there's less and less new monsters as time goes on, because they are super resource intensive to create. If I'm creating a subspecies, well, guess what? I don't have to rig a new skeleton. The skeleton's already done. I can only slightly redesign an older monster into a new... I don't have to redesign an old monster into a new engine, right? Rathalos is already modeled. Why would I even care about modeling a Zarathalos? You get what I mean? I can create a new monster. I don't have to create a new monster from scratch, which I already said is quite major. I don't have to create new music for it. The moveset is already done for me. 60% of the moveset is already done. I don't even have to think about that. Way less animation work to do. I don't have to classify the monster via its power structure. Subspecies are always stronger than the original counterpart, so I just say it's far easier to place within an ecology. Writing new lore in ecology means it already has a base foundation on it. We already know how it behaves and why it adapted to specific ecological changes, right? Now you just have to slightly twist those to fit the character design. What else? You already have the foundation. Yeah, its AI is already somewhat done too, and like I said, its hitboxes are already done. You're going to change the values for the hit zones, but you don't have to test for hitboxes, how wide the sweeping, how it's going to hit the player. That work's already done. Far less resource intensive, which is super useful. That's called recycling, and every game uses it. And the third major reason why I think it's super good is that it expands on the world of Monster Hunter, right? The idea of creating a subspecies is not only to help on the developmental side and to help diverse the play patterns by adding new gimmicks, it also expands the world building of Monster Hunter. There are good ways and bad ways to do this. Let me explain as easy as I can possibly do it. How's it going, man? The idea of Monster Hunter is that it's centralized on an ecosystem dynamic with multiple regions separating the overall continent, right? If you look at the old world, there are definite section off path from region to region, right? If you go to the eastern part, you'll find a lot more forests than if you go to the western part of the old continent, of the old world. It means that brand new location would mean a different type of evolution path if a species were to migrate to an environment, just like I said about a Mudron. So, if you were to create something like this in the real world, what would you get? Would you get something like a genus of bears, for example, which I already talked on previously? Pandas, brown bears, sun bears, Alaskan bears, polar bears, they all live on different parts of a continent. Like pandas are much more eastern than sun bears. They live in different part of those those locations, but they look wildly different because they have adapted to specific evolutionary change. But they all share the same principles. They are mammalians, four-legged animals. They are very heavy in most scenarios, right? They're very heavy land animals with thick ass fur. That's what bears are. So, Subspecies in Monster Hunter tries to achieve the same concept. It emphasizes a lot of how the world of Monster Hunter works as an ecosystem to be a more believable living world with giant monsterized animals living in it. And you can see that in most underdeveloped fantasy world where subspecies or specialization or subsection of a genus of an animal kingdom is a total letdown. For example, here's a very bad use of recycling. Ocarina of Time is an old game, right? It's a fantastic game. Ocarina of Time is amazing. Here's the thing, Skulltulas live in every major region of that game. It's in every dungeon, but these spiders look the same everywhere. There are no changes despite the regional changes that these animals undergo. And there are things you could say that, oh, perhaps they're nomadic. Well, that's where I bring the example of the wolf foes, which you see on screen, which is the ice wolf foes and the normal wolf foes. The normal wolf foes, or the forest wolf foes, you'll see them near the Kokiri forest, right? Around the Kokiri forest. In the ice wolf foes, you'll see next to the glaciers of the Zoro's domain. Specifically after Ganon takes over. Gotta be a little more accurate on this one. If you look at the models, there are exactly 0 changes besides coloring and texturing going on with the Ice Wolf foes. They have the exact same behavioral system, they have the exact same attack, the exact same patterns, they work in the exact same way, only their values, texturing, and colorations are different. There's nothing new about this. This is a bad use of recycling because it is an enemies that could be just applied anywhere. Wolves live anywhere on the planet, and they just give it a different color to pass it off as something new while it isn't. You can make the case that sculptures work everywhere because they're spiders, and so could you with wolves that live pretty much on every major continent. But yeah, we're just color swapping, which is what some subspecies in Monster Hunter do have a lot of issues with. And you can do it well in most scenarios that Monster Hunter does pretty well. Monster Hunter is fantastic at recycling ideas and developing them and recontextualizing them into entirely new entities, or you can do it extremely poorly like Zelda, like I've shown you here in Ocarina of Time, or even worse, like in Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is an amazing game that has terrible enemy variety. If you look at the enemy variety in Zelda, right, Lizalfos only change the color, and those colorations don't mean anything from those characters for those enemies. Gold Lizalfos are just gold, and because they're golds, they're beefier, they're not tied to ecological changes, and they appear in every region. And it's such a not a good use of recycling. It's not good. I get why you do that because you want to have Lizalfos everywhere, but they have nothing going for it. They don't have property changes between them. I think the farthest you can go is, I think there uses different weapons that have elemental properties, which would mean that, well, in this case, you know, if they attack you with an ice weapon, you get frozen over, but that's about it. Again, it's another case of, oh, let's recolor the monster, let's retexture the monster, but let's not change anything about the monsters. Exact same patterns, exact same attacks, exact same scenarios. Fighting Lizalfos in the frosty mountains of the hinterlands in Breath of the Wild is the same as finding the Lizalfos in the forest of Kokiri in Breath of the Wild. Exact same thing. Not contextualized correctly, or at least not contextualized in an interesting manner. So, now that we've talked about why you do that as a game developer, why the major benefits of recycling and why you do that. Oh yeah. Their fire does have, their breathing does have some kind of elemental shift, which is a different property, right? But it's the same attack. It's the exact same thing under different properties. So, you're correct. 100% correct. That's also just one change. That's what I mean. It's one change. It's not enough. So, how can you realistically make something that's radically different from something you're trying to recycle, right? I want to recycle the Puke Puke from Monster Hunter, right? How am I going to recycle it? Well, the answer is you give it enough gameplay deviations, you give it a different lore, you give it a different story, and you give it different visual changes to mark that as something new by using the major foundations of that character, right? So, I want to make Puke Puke into an interesting subspecies. I have to change its background, I have to change its story, I have to change its location, and I have to change how it behaves. And by doing that, I also need to pitch how it's going to fight differently. Big challenges for recycling, but if you're going to go the extra mile of making something interesting, that's how you should do it. And before we go any forwards, I want to start by looking at a game that does get criticized quite a bit for reusing boss battles. but it still puts a significant effort into differentiating its visuals from one another. And I'd even argue does enough in patterns and attack changes to still be significant. And its lore is flat out amazing as well, right? We're going to be talking about goddamn God of War. God of War 2018 is an amazing way to recontextualize visually enemies and recycling content for the benefits of it. Amazing game, right? You can dislike God of War, but if you look at everybody that majorly praises the game, they pretty much all say the same thing as a major point of criticism, which is it goes a long way to repeating and recycling a lot of bosses, right? Which would be, in this case, the trolls and the Valkyries. Now, if you're looking at the trolls specifically, because this is where it gets criticized much more than the rest. Oh, is the music on? What about music? Yeah, there's my music. Sorry, music was gone for a little bit. What's that? Okay, yeah, trolls. Trolls in God of War look amazingly different, right? You look at this and you're like, wow, this is a lot, right? You got the belt going on, you got the runic, you got the horns, you got the face. It looks quite deformed, it looks grotesque. The pillar looks like it's made of rock and is tied together by a bit of rope. It has tools by its belt, by its pants, loincloth, everything, right? And you look at the other one, you're like, well, okay, it still has the same principle. It has a loincloth, it has a pair of pants, it still has the stone, but now it has a mask over its head, and it's colored differently. So essentially, you're going to look and perceive it to be slightly different, which is exactly how you want to do. And then you look at the other one, you're like, wow, that looks radically different. The pillar is something completely else. It has not a mask, but a helmet over its head. The horns are styled differently. The pants and the belt, through belt, are much more different. There's like a residue of something over its arms and torso. And then you look on the other one and you're like, wow, this is much different. This almost looks like a tree ant. Almost, right? This is recontextualizing the same proportion, the same body, the same basis of a creature skeleton into something different. That looks like wood now. The pillar looks like wood and it's still tied by a rope. But look at that. That's made of rock and stone. It's completely different. And you look at that and you're like, oh wow, that's a nice giant. They make sure to give it a new horn and new face element. And it's like shaded with a lot of ice on it. And it has like body proportion. The belt is different. Like it has different tools here. And the stone is probably made with some sort of glacier. Well, not glacier, but it's still stone, right? It's still a stone pillar, but there's still something different going on about it. Although this is quite egregious as use of recycling. And far less interesting that this, for example, which is the Grendels of the Frost and Forest, I think it's called. But like the changes are significant enough that you'd be like, wow, this is a great use of recycling. This is an amazing use of recycling enemy design for the purposes of boss. Where the trolls found in what I spent doing yesterday, just before going to bed, I was like, okay, so if visually and lore-wise, especially in the lore stories, all of these trolls have something different going on, especially for the major trolls encounter. So like this one right here, I don't remember its name. The Bridge Guardian, which of the dam, which is this one, and you have the Grendels, right? All look majorly different from one another. And what I spent yesterday looking at all of the bosses of the trolls, and I've noted which one have new attack patterns, new properties in their fight mechanics, and figured out why they're not as beloved as another mechanic we'll touch on. Another set of bosses we'll touch on right after is that, well, every new fight basically only has 1 or 2 new moves attached to them with 1 new property, right? So out of a subset of, say, 10 moves that the first troll gives you, which is the one that you're seeing on screen right now, well, this one does, 10 attacks. Then the next one only has or varies 1 attack to another one. So you still get 10 moves, but that one does 1 attack differently. And probably the most different one, which is the one that people have less issues with, is the Bridge Guardian, which is this one I'm showing on the screen. And this one goes a long way into making something that is completely new, perhaps the best addition to how God of War recycled its content, by the way. And that one is, I believe, hold on. 1, 2, 3 new attacks, entirely new attacks on recycled attacks with different properties, plus 2 different properties, which is it can use teleportation and spawn orbs that can chase you afterwards to vary its gameplay patterns. That's how you do the fight properly. If you look at another subset of bosses in God of War that get the shaft, usually because they believe it's not that interesting, it's the Valkyries. And Valkyries are usually complained about because they're quite hard. Which, you know what, that's funny. That's really, really funny that people complain that it's hard when you're playing God of War on optional bosses, but that's a different criticism complaint I have against those people that criticize God of War. That's a different thing altogether. But you look at them and you're like, wow. Wow. Like, the ornamentation between all of them, vastly different. The lore, the story behind them, vastly different. The look of them and their gameplay patterns, vastly different from one another. They share sets of attacks, they share the same set of skeleton, but this is what you can do while recycling content. You don't have to rig in new skeletons in order for that to happen. You just have to make sure you redefine a base of a character into something new. Give it new story, new lore. You change enough of its gameplay, about 20 to 40%, to make it feel different, new, exciting, and you still get to recycle your material. The ornaments are different, the attire is different, but it still retains the same consistency applied for that to be the case, right? It has a fundamental consistency, design consistency, that they are a warrior species. They are an order of warrior. They are all Valkyries of Valhalla, whatever the hell the lore is, right? They're treated as separate characters with separate history and lore, and it shows. They look phenomenal, right? All of them look phenomenal, and they still keep a very, very similar silhouettes. So that's God of War 2018. That's how it uses recycling. Yeah, thank you. Nor Super Soldier, right? But we can agree they look vastly different. Vastly different. But they use the same basis to look different, and they give them new stories, new lore, new applications, new gameplay patterns. Depending if you play God of War 2018 or not. You can agree more or less with what I said, that's fine. You can refute what I say, that's fine too. They're supposed to be very hard. Yeah, well, you know. I mean, we can go on this a long time, but it's kind of like the same people that said Fatalis is too hard in Iceborne. Well, that's the point of Fatalis. He's the last super boss of the game. You need, like, Master Rank 100? No, that's Ruiner and Negante. But you need to go through low rank, high rank, Master Rank. Then you need to go through Elatrion first. I think you need to go through Safi'jiiva just to get to Fatalis, and he's supposed to be the super boss of that game. It's fine if he's super hard. That's the point, just like the Valkyries. So I'm glad we're on the same page, bud. I'm glad we're on the same page on this one. If you have anything you'd like to refute, you're welcome to as well. Alright, so now that I've made that comparison for God of War has done amazing visual changes to its character to look significantly different, haptic, different story and lore to it. And Monster Hunter does quite a bit to resemble it as well. Although they function differently to recycle the content, it's essentially using the same assets to create something new. I've talked for a long time. I've talked nonsense for 50 minutes now. They share the exact, like every monster, they share the exact set of limbs, right? Exact same number of limbs. They share the exact same proportion, and they have pretty much the same inspiration. You can make a case that something like Aurora Summercamp is based more like a Banshee or a Ghost, rather than the base inspiration of some mechanic, which I don't really have it on my hand, in my head. I can make the same argument with Blood Orange Bishaten, by the way. What is it? It's like Bishaten is a Tengu. I think it's a Karasu Tengu, and you can make the argument that Blood Orange Bishaten isn't necessarily a Karasu Tengu, but more of a Dai Tengu, while still being a Karasu Tengu, right? You can go with, they have the same base inspiration, but they can differentiate within slight adjustments to a mythology, an animal, a basis, a concept. That's how I think it's viewed. So if you're going to recycle content as a game developer, oh, I've already blah, blah. So Black Diablos is, in my head, Black Diablos should be a variant rather than a subspecies. That's just me, because a subspecies should be a differentiating part of a subset of population, which it isn't. It's just a female Diablos. I think it's misclassified into subspecies, what should be a variant. Although, again, Monster Hunter plays fast and loose with its description, and exceptions are extremely large, so again, you're free to view it as you'd like. This is how I perceive it. So, if I'm going to recycle content as a game developer, there are a lot of things I need to do in order for it to be passable. First and foremost, as if I'm going to recycle content, I'm not going to go through an exorbitant amount of effort into specifically changing everything about a character while the whole point was to recycle it. So the first thing you need to do is you need to limit the scope of changes. Number one, you can't rework a design by changing the amount of limbs. I already talked about that. Same thing with proportions. The proportions have to be similar. The third thing is the silhouette has to be within the same relativistic size, which is very similar to proportion. But for example, you can't give a monster, right? You can't give Baroth, for example, huge antler horns behind because you change the silhouettes. It has to be a fairly cosmetic change that doesn't disrupt the silhouette that much. That's also for clarifying the concept of the battle and make sure that everybody responds to the exact same move in between the main species and subspecies equally. You have to make sure it's just as clarified in the subspecies that it is in the main species. You have to be very, very careful. On a different yokai, alright, you can add, I think you're only allowed to add a maximum of about 5 changes. And even then, I think 5 physiological changes is too much. It's too much to add. So I think the sweet spot probably is about 3 physiological changes if you're going to make a subspecies or rework a character design. And the changes have to be made to represent the character's story, history, and personality. So how it functions during a fight, that's basically its history. It fights like this because it was born and adapted and behaved in the wild like this. It behaves like this because it has those kinds of personality traits. If it's mischievous, you make it look mischievous. And if its story is, well, it survived like this, you have to make it look like this. You have to respect the changes applied to make those fit your character descriptions. So now, it's time to experiment. Let's talk about improving existing subspecies. That's a lot. Let me take a sip of water real fast. I've been talking for a bit. So those are my ground rules. So those are the rules I want to apply to try and limit the scope of how many things you can change about a character design, how you can improve or change a character design. Monster Hunter has done a wonderful job, wonderful, absolutely lovely job at trying to create different scenarios where those character designs can be read differently. Far, far differently, by the way. Before we go ahead and try to make a change of our own or talk about a change of our own, I want to show you guys something. It's not something I've made, by the way, but I want to show it to you because I think it's kind of funny. I think it's really funny. This isn't my opinion. This is a community thing that I found on Reddit. I found on Reddit 20 minutes before the stream. So, these are a collection of variants and, yeah, these are a collection of variants. There's some subspecies in there that a random community member classified into its own tier list, which would be, what do you mean these aren't subspecies? Which is Druitotus and Lavasia, which really confusing when they are different species and not whatever. Butotus, same thing. It's like these should be the same thing. Ravodon and Neurogun feel extremely similar. They're sharing the same skeleton, but that again probably is more along the lines of a different family of animals in a genus. Like that's just a straight up recolor. Those are the same thing but angry. One or two different gimmicks to it. Then you got fighting. It feels like fighting a whole new monster, which is where I hold in high regards, called Puke Puke. Brute Tigers is pretty up there too. Stygian is an interesting one to say the least, because I do think it falls under one, maybe adding one or two gimmick, but that's a personal preference. And the high tier up there, which is, you know, speaks for itself. Even if you disagree with it or not, you can see how the general community feels about certain monsters already. Which, today, I won't be talking that much about, let's say, the three upper echelon tier monsters, which would be Stygian, Brute, and Coral. We'll be mostly focusing on the bottom tiers, because there's so many good things going on about Ebony, and Coral, and Brute, that we don't really need to touch on them, because we don't really improve them that much. So I want to talk about the other part that could be generally improved, that I just can't talk about them during my short, because shorts are too short. Here I can spend 56 minutes just rambling about what a subspecies is and why it should be considered important in Monster Hunter ecology. And I can touch on what I can, or at least I think, can improve those character designs. Alright. So now that's gone. Now, here we are on the subspecies page of the Monster Hunter fandom, right? This is where you go if you want to nerd out about your favorite subspecies. Wait, hold on. Absolutely not. We won't have boss fight. We won't have chill music. Perfect. So, if you go on the page of Monster Hunter Wiki, subspecies, I've already talked about the definition. It's going to list every type of subspecies by definition, classification, and generation it is from. Let's go over them real quick. And I'll go over the ones I'm mainly familiar with, because I think this is where I can put in the most amount of input into. This is where I think I can be most efficient with. I think we should move the webcam, right? I think we should move the webcam. Because it's more on the left corner, so. Beautiful. It's gonna be easier for you guys to see, so this is why I'm doing it this way. Alright. Blah, blah, blah. Here we go. I'm not familiar with Yankutsu, but if I'm going to say something that's anything different about it, is that it's a different color. And when you're plastering on different colors on a character design, right? The thing that you want to do is usually colors are big. Like, there's a big reason why developers use colors in order to be signify something different about a character. It's because it's very efficient at very easily telling you what general location it inhabits. So, what can I derive as someone that's not familiar with Yankutku to say it's different? When it has blue coloration, so blue coloration immediately, what do you associate blue with as an environment? Well, you associate it with water, beaches, marines, swamps, those kinds of places where water would be. So, in chat, if you are familiar with Yankutku, right? If you are familiar with Yankutku as a species, you know its ecology. I don't know what Yankutku is. I don't know what its ecology is. I don't know why it behaves the way it does or anything like that. If you're familiar with Yankutku as a monster, tell me, how is blue Yankutku different than Yankutku? Enough to tell me this is a different character design. I should perceive this as different character design and not just, well, we got lazy, we couldn't figure out how to make it physiologically different or add anything to subset an adaptation change to its environment. Is it red? Red colored. Okay. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit of a disadvantage. I'm a little bit of a disadvantage, excuse me, because I'm partially colorblind. So there's going to be a lot of color that I'm going to misread. So I appreciate the fact checking. It still lives in forests and still breathes fireball. Okay. So Yan Kutkut and Blue Yan Kutkut does the same thing. Still lives in forests and... Wait, hold on. And still breathes fireball. So to me, this is not good. Why would you want to make... Okay, let's actually argue in favor of Blue Yan Kutkut, okay? If it has blue coloration as its name suggests, even though you tell me it's red, so let's go with red. Red mostly associated with fire. I think we can agree this is a very typical color as with orange too associated with fire, right? All right, fine, good, solid. Yeah, nothing stands out about blue. Well, here's an idea, okay? And this is how I perceive it, by the way, not how you perceived it. I want to be very, very clear. Blue, to me, if you're going to tie it with something like fire, to me means blue star, or at least in my perception of fire, which means that fire that isn't red or orange, far hotter. Blue fire, far hotter than red fire, like substantially so. So, are the fireballs of Yan Kutkut that much more powerful, or are visually designed to look different, like with a hotter flame, like a blue flame, than regular Yan Kutkuts? This is where this character design I tend to lead with this character design. Does it attempt to do something with coloration to look different with fireballs? If the answer is no, because it still shoots red fireballs even though its name is Blue Yan Kutkut, this isn't giving me enough visual signifiers that this is different enough. If it still lives in forests, it makes sense that its physiological changes are very similar. If you don't want to say it's specialized in a certain field, which is it still shoots and breathes fireballs, right? Why don't you do it like Silver Rathlos in Golrathian and give it like a pocket of fire beneath its lungs? They still look the same. Okay, I think we can agree on this. This isn't enough visual signifiers to tell me this is different. Why don't you, if you're gonna say it's gonna breed heavier fire because you want to make it blue coloration, do we like Seething Basilisk? Do we like Silver Rathlos? Do we like Golrathian, where their fire, like, you can see the fire under their skin, like, pumping and breathing, it's living. You can see it coursing through the body like veins. You know how in Espionage you can see when it's agitated because the flow, the blood flow, you can, like, see through its skin veinly, like you can see through a leaf and can see the patterns of blood flow, alright? Do it like that. That'd be a great way to use coloration to its advantage, to, like, be like, oh, instead of changing physiologically to an environment, make it specialized in a certain context. So that's for Yan Kutkut, which I think everybody agrees in chat that it is a pretty pointless subspecies. Alright, let's keep going. Unfortunately, I'm going to skip the ones that the renders are just not great at, or maybe just don't give me enough perspective. It's very hard to define what this looks like, unfortunately. I have a very hard time. Might be the pixelization. I think the render just isn't, like, it's a good render for probably what it was Monster Hunter 4, so 3DS. That's actually a pretty good render for a 3DS character. I don't know, man. It's still a bit weird. Okay, so I already talked about Puke Puke, but I still want to touch upon Kurl because I think it's such a brilliant thing, and I want to talk about it. They started getting interesting around Gen 3. That makes sense. I believe there might be some difference in purple Gyroceptus. Yeah, sure. Unfortunately, I just don't know enough about it, and the render doesn't help me that much, so unfortunately, I'm gonna be skipping it. Yeah, I mean, it's design creep. Copper, it's all about design creep, right? Design creep is a really weird feature, and I think Monster Hunter heavily benefited for its artist renditions as time went on. They got more experience, they hired more experienced artists, they have more time and resources to put into developing better creature and subsets of creature design. So yes, I think you are 100% correct in saying they get more interesting around the 3rd gen. But I want to talk about Puke, and here's the reason why I think this is where perception of character design is such an important distinction to make, and it changes from person to person. Coral Puke is just a color differentiation, right? There are no other physiological changes to it. None. That can't be argued. Face, the face, right? Completely different. Still has the same horns, still has the same type of fur. Wings are exactly made of the same membrane. The feet aren't changed. The tail does the exact same thing. The tongue is exactly the same, does the exact same thing. There are there are absolutely zero differentiation between normal Puke and coral Puke. Now, why is it important to say that I think coral Puke is brilliant? This is where a case where color does a lot, and this is where a case where perception does a lot for me. Normal Puke fits and blends perfectly, flawlessly in the ancient forests of the New World. Dead on, it's perfect for it. It also goes into the Wildspire Waste in some occasions, so it has some brownish features. That's perfect, right? It fits perfectly from that environment. It's still very saturated, so you believe it is venomous in nature. Is it poisonous or venomous? It shoots out lobs of... So it should be venom if it shoots out lobs of toxic fumes, right? So it's venom. It has to be venom. Anyway, so it lobs out puffs of venom at you, right? So it's very saturated, and thus it does that very well, right? If you go over the coral, oh my god, the colors are completely different. Now, if you think about where it lives in the Coral Highlands. The Coral Highlands in New World are perhaps the most saturated look you'll ever see in that game. It's highly fantastical with lots and lots of very strange color combinations you wouldn't see in real life, because that's what that place is. The Coral Highlands is a fantasy place. Well, of course it's a fantasy place, but it's a heightened ecological system that you wouldn't normally see because of the upsurge of bioenergy that region constantly is under, right? So, Coral Puke also blends with the environment in a completely different subsection. And where the perception of how I think it's brilliant is way different. If you're thinking about a creature that is able to shoot water, you start thinking about marine animals, right? Or you start thinking about like crabs that can make air bubble. You can start to think about a lot of things. Where I think Puke really strikes a chord with me is when I think about animals that can basically shoot jets of water, because that's what Coral Puke does. I think of marine mammals. I think of things like dolphins. I think of things like whale, orcas, and all of those things, right? So, if I think of something that's highly, that's a water marine animal, and I think, well, how does it shoot those water jets if it's a mammalian animal? Well, it does it through their blowhorn. Oh, and then I'm like, well, hold on. Coral Puke already has a blowhole, so to say, which is through its tail tip. And you're like, well, hold on. Coral Puke doesn't need to have any more appendages done or in its character model to essentially shoot the water out like a water cannon, because it already has a perfect representation of what a water cannon or pressurized water cannon would be, which you can find in real life, which would be a blowhole, or in this case, the water tip of its the tip of its tail that can shoot it like a pressurized water cannon. And now you can perceive it as perhaps something mechanical, like a machinery, a robot shooting water pressure. And this is where Coral-Puke-Puke begins to be extremely interesting to me as a subspecies, because it is perfectly adapted to the coral highlands by being exactly what it is. It's recontextualizing the same character design without changing almost anything except its coloration to add a variety of gameplay differences to make its fight wildly different. Coral-Puke-Puke is brilliant. It's so brilliant by doing almost nothing. It's Luigi in Mario Party brilliant. Win by doing absolutely nothing. I think Coral-Puke-Puke is awesome, but I'm probably the only person that thinks of Coral-Puke-Puke as having an appendage water cannon jet along the lines of mammalian marine animals. This is where perception is heavily dependent of the context I put it in. So, now that we've looked at a subspecies that is fairly disappointing, and a subspecies that I think is highly beneficial to its recoloration, let's move on. I don't want to talk about Carmine. I don't see anything worth of note, let's say. I guess we could talk about Jake Baroth. I guess we could talk about that. I could, I just don't have any strong feelings about it. How about we go a little bit further? Uragon and Steel Uragon. I don't know about that. Chat, can you tell me about an above third gen monster you would like to see me just depict? Like, any subspecies along the list. If you see one, just tell me. I'll take a look at it. I'll take a look at its ecology, I'll take a look at it visually, and I'll define my own, presupposition, I guess. So, like, I'm scrolling down. If you see anything that's interesting, tell me. Lavasion subspecies. Wow! You really couldn't be bothered. Okay. Ooh, that was cool. Purple Ludroth looks kind of cool. Glacial Agnator. Yeah, okay. I really like Agnator. Summercalf, Mamudron, yep. Graphian. Ugh. Rathos, Ratkezu. Oh, that's interesting. Agnator. Alright, let's take a look at Agnator. Regular Agnator, that's very, not necessarily crocodilian. I guess crocodilian. If I see Agnator as it is, right? I look at the shape of its mouth, and I'm like, well, that's clearly crocodilian, a caiman, alligator, very type of facial features construction. If I look at the rest of the body, that's very almost fish-like. What type of animals have cells going up and down the spine? The only thing that comes to mind would be, is it Spinosaurus? What other types of animals have giant cells that run down the back of them? I'm trying to think. Nothing comes to mind. Yo, Mask, how you doing? Welcome back. Been a long time, bud. Yeah, it's almost very fishy. Like, it's almost mixing the elements of fish in the elements of more crocodilian features, but it lives in lava. So my guess is that Agnator is a monster that's very, like, it doesn't spend that much time on land. I think it spends a lot of time swimming in lava because it still has fins, it has plenty of sails to help it guide. I think, if anything, it sometimes goes to land, but mostly spends its time swimming in lava. somewhat not too dissimilar from what Lavasioth is. How it uses the fire, maybe it eats up, like it purposefully eats up its own body temperature to make the rock around it swim better around its the lava or the molten rock, right? So it can eat up the rock, literally raise up the temperatures of the rock around it so it can swim through it and like divide like a shark with the sail, right? To cut through the rocks. That'd be interesting. How you been, man? How have you been, man? Gotta tell you, I haven't had something... Okay, Matt. I'm gonna take 2 minutes just to go on a tangent, right? I'm gonna go 2 minutes just to go on a tangent. I didn't... You guys, you know what swatting is, right? When a streamer gets swatted. I didn't get swatted at my home. So like a person rushed in my place of work, right? Yesterday. And essentially, he was mentally ill, right? He had deficiencies. And he said like an armed man was chasing after him. So we had to lock down the dojo. We had to lock down the dojo. Because like the guy was like, there's a guy with a firearm, he's chasing me. Like, oh god damn. We gotta lock down everything. So we locked it down. Then I had to call the police in. The guy shut me up. Essentially was like, don't call the police, don't call the police. He can't hear us. The guy can hear us. He's somewhere. And so I was locked with that person. And yeah, we were locked, called the police, figured out that guy was mentally ill, and we were locked in the dojo for like solid half an hour, waiting for the police, gun in arms, trying to see if there was an armed person around the block. Super scary. The guy was crazy, man. I'm good, nobody was hurt. Guy was escorted to an hospital to regulate his medication. And that was insane. I have been good outside of that. Just an insane little story I wanted to tell on a side note. But how have you been, man? Been a while. Argumentation beak. It uses beak to did through the molten rock. Do you mean dig? I think you mean dig. Dig through the molten rock. I think that's what you meant. Which, you know what? It's very similar to the concept I was saying. So, okay. I can see that. I can see how its character design is like quite efficient, right? It's very efficient. Very red, orange look. Uses beak. Very, very stout. I'm guessing it's very lean too. It's not very large. So it's very long, but not very large, you know? Okay. Now let's look at its subspecies, which is glacial acnot. Oh my god, the rendering's so bad! Wow. I think the ice is a little bit overdone. If I'm gonna get... Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, because this is a complete guess, by the way. This is a complete guess of what glacial acnator is. It clumps bits of ice on its body. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Maybe it does. Does it? Wait, hold on. Probably still uses its beak, like the upper part of its snout, to like shovel the ice out. Like, you know those ice boats that have like this extremely hard ridge at the front of the boat so it can like crack the ice? I think they're called icebreakers. I think that's what it uses to like break the ice. And like the ridges of its scale and the sides of its sail like clumps amounts of snow that turns into ice. Because it'd be very weird if just clumps of ice just stick on his body, right? It'd be much more believable if that was dried snow that turned into ice. Or maybe even what it does is that it slightly heats up its body temperature to bring the snow up to nearly freezing temperatures, and then flash freezes it to become ice. And basically still swims through snow and ice just like regular Agnator in an icy context. Because if I'm looking at it, I don't see any changes to the body. I don't see any changes of the body that make it behave differently under icy conditions. Oh crap, and I missed a lot. Hold on. In Americans say nothing interesting happens in Canada. It's covered in fire cell stone. It hardens when it stays on land. Sorry for the typo. No worries. I've been good. The schedule makes gaming difficult. I've been replaying my Zelda games. Skin on. Yeah, that's true. Tears is coming. Been announced. Only been 5 years. Dude, I don't even know how it took him nearly... Well, it's gonna take him 6 years to develop that game. Kind of crazy when you think about it. Yo, have you been hopping on the Trevor's stream? Mask? I think that would have been quite good. The main difference between Agnator and Subspecies is its armor mechanics. If Agnator is out of lava, the lava on its body harder than glacial. Agnator does the opposite. So, if you strike the ice, it's essentially... Whoa, no, hold on. Okay, so if it swims, like it has the armored... Because it's frozen over. Its armor is frozen over because of the ice. And once you strike the ice strips off, and then it makes its body soften apart. Unlike the Agnator, where the lava fire cell stones like harden on its body as it is not swimming through lava anymore because of room temperatures and hardening temperatures. I think that's what you mean. You, the Oroctor, and Emittrizing Lava Caverns. Oh, no. I know about the small ones of the Agnator. I do. If it digs, it gains armor. If it stats out the ground, it loses armor. Gotcha, I understand. Okay. So, I think the render doesn't do it justice. I think Glacial Agnator's render doesn't do it justice. And I don't just mean in the art direction in general, because, my god, this bit of ice is a sword in the eye, really. But I think if it was, like, overly cladded in clumps of ice, I think it'd be a better visual signifier, right? So, like, I think the bit around the cell works quite well to signify clumps of ice. Along with the tail, by the way, it's just, like, the limbs and the facial features. It kind of turns me off. I feel like it should be more extra. Like, even more pronounced that it's, like, big clumps of ice you can knock over. Or maybe, you know what? Just an idea, right? That's just an idea. I live in Canada, right? In Canada, one of my favorite things to do in Canada is when it starts, like, we're around the glacial temperatures, right? And stalactites start to form and stalagmites start to form, right? One of my favorite things to do is knock off the stalactites. What if instead of just being clumps of ice, what if along the cell you had giant stalactites, stalagmites of ice, pointy bits clouding in like an armor of stalactites along the cell of the glacial Agnator, and you could knock it off? Because just clumps of ice is kind of interesting. If you say to me it has armor along the sides of being like stalagmites and stalactites along the cell, it would already fit the context of the cell. If it swims through the ice and accumulates that snow or ice through its cell, like giving it like a pointy look, I think would read as far more aggressive, and to me would feel like you could knock those clumps of ice much better. How to dig is by clacking their beaks very hard and make very fast spin. Okay. Oh, that's very cool. So we haven't spoken for like 5 months. I've come back to check up. Yeah, I hit 1.5. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mask. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming along. I really appreciate having you here. I'll try to be better about content posting, but you know, sometimes I just don't do it. Make them travel real fast. Okay. Well, how about what I just said, guys? Instead of just having clumps of ice, how about you just have stalagmites and stalactites up running across the cell of the glacial Agnator, right? Because as a Canadian, I see a clump of ice, I don't bang it off. If I see stalactites, oh, you know the hell I'm chopping those karate chop style. The fire pike wyvern. That's very interesting. Look up Agnator intro. Yeah, probably will. Guys, give me like, I don't know. Give me 2 minutes. I'm going to the bathroom. I'll be back. Alright, I'm there. I'm here. I'm back. Glacial Anctor ice armor thaws if it stays on land. I presume so, right? Alright, let's continue. Making it easier to permanently destroy. Permanently destroy the ice? Okay. But I think that's how you improve. If I were to improve the character design by making it a clearer appearance that you can knock off the ice, or like, oh, it swims through the ice like a shark, right? You put a veil, or make the cell a more prominent part of being like encased in ice, like the whole cell making encased in ice, or make it like stalactite armor. The armor in general. Okay. All right, let's look at another one. Yeah. Let's look at another one. Tell me one you want me to look at. Any one of them, I'm fine. Because this is a discussion as to how you can potentially improve a character design like that. I kind of want to talk about Nightshade, honestly. Kind of want to talk about Nightshade Paolumu. Barioth and Kezu. Alright. We'll talk about both. How about that? We'll talk about Red Kezu and then we'll talk about the Barioth one. Can't be Frostfang. Has to be Barioth. Sand Barioth. So this is a 3rd gen subspecies. Is it the rendering? Or is the back ridges of the Barioth not as present in the Sand Barioth? It might just be a perspective shift too, right? So the first thing to note is the coloration, right? I think from what I can see it has a red face and the rest of his body is quite brownish, greenish. Unless I'm mistaken. Please correct me. Colorblindness is one hell of a thing. I think Sand Barioth is mostly... well, it has to be sand colored. That only makes sense now, wouldn't it? Okay. Here's what I'm thinking. Barioth is kind of extra as a base design. If you look at this, you're like, wow, this is a lot. This is a lot, right? Just an abundance of spikes and ridges to be the ultimate predator. If I was to make a nightmare monster, like a monster chasing you, and I was like, this is a tiger monster. This is like, imagine if a tiger, a Belgalian tiger, was a monster, and it was chasing you nightmare. This is what I'd make a Barioth. I'd make Barioth. Sand Barioth looks a ton like a recolor. So if you give me something like coloration differences. Well, you know, we're not talking about the... Unfortunately, we're not here to talk Mask about the logistics of how they migrate to the region, right? We're not here to talk about that, unfortunately. I'm here to talk about the visual changes and how that would apply. Firestorms and rides the wind to help it get the upper hand in fights. Okay. So, essentially, what you're telling me, Firoa? This Firoa... I always have a hard time, sorry man. I really have a hard time. Is that this is a creature that uses its wing far more prominently than normal Barioth does. It's not that normal Barioth does not use its wings, but the way you're speaking, it's that Sand Barioth uses its wings a lot more, right? And I've already said in my PowerPoint presentation. Can't believe I made a PowerPoint presentation. That's kind of insane, honestly. As I've already said in my PowerPoint where is it? Where's my... I was already said in my PowerPoint presentation, proportions have to be similar. But if you're telling me that it has to be like it is that much more agile in the air, why not make the wings more prominent? You're right, the reason space is red is because when it eats blood. When it eats blood and then gets stuck to its face. Okay, so it's not necessarily coloration change, just basically it was mad at what that kind of predatory lifestyle, dietary lifestyle. That's pretty sick. That's pretty cool. I've already talked about that. Oh no, I haven't talked about that. I got a video coming up with this similar idea in mind, that it's like dried blood dripping over the monster. I really like that idea. So it's just sand covered, right? So it's not that it like ambushes people by hiding in the sand. It's just that it's covered in sand. It's what I'm getting. Oh, I know that's what the spikes are used for regular Baryoth. I know about the ecology of regular Baryoth. Let me be very clear. I understand the ecology of the regular Baryoth. It's not what I mean. I think it's too much. I think regular Baryoth is just too much. Where is it? I'm trying to figure it out. Yeah, I just think that regular Baryoth is like, well, there's spikes here, there's spikes here, there's spikes here, there's spikes here, there's spikes there, there's spikes there, there's spikes there, there's spikes there, right? I get that the arm guard spikes are there to help it stabilize, but there's also spikes by the rows of the spine, right? The rows of the tail. And once you break the spikes by the arm guards, well, it doesn't use the spikes by its tail to stabilize, right? So it's just like, well, you already have spikes fucking everywhere. And I get that these are the one you use for that, but you don't need spikes by the shoulders. You don't need spikes by the edge of the tail. You don't need spikes by the edge of the back limbs, right? This is what I mean by too much. I don't mean that just having spikes by the arm guards is fine. You just don't need the other stuff. That's what I mean by too much. Sandberry glides the sandstorms it spits out. Okay. Again, my thing with Sandberryoth, okay? I think the coloration's fine if you mean to say that it's an ambush predator that lives by hiding in the sand and hops by shooting the sandstorm, glides over the enemy, and then just dunks on them like the regular Baryoth, where it pounds on the enemy. That's cool. I like that Sid idea. It recontextualizes it quite well. That's quite fantastic. I think a better way to show that is, one, remove the spikes, because why the hell does it need stabilization in sand environment where everything is soft? It's not like spikes are gonna add that much friction to it. It's ridiculous to believe it's gonna add friction, right? You don't need that many spikes on Sandberryoth. From what you guys are telling me, it doesn't need that, ecologically speaking. And I think you need to make the wings more prominent. I think you need to make the wings bigger. Again, it's slight adaptation changes without changing major proportional aspects of the character, which I think is what you need to do to make Sandberryoth perhaps more interesting visually than currently is. Because the ecology and recontextualization of its abilities sounds great. Like using sandstorms to like glide over an enemy and pounce, that's cool. That's really good way to recontextualize the move. Saying it ambushes by like laying on the ground and then spitting out the sandstorm, and like, that's cool. All of that is awesome, right? You just don't need the spikes for stabilization like the regular Baryoth does, because you can't use friction on sand. Sand is not a clump of objects. I mean, it is a clump of objects, but it's not gonna work. You can't stabilize on sand. If you want to say it stabilizes on ground because it lives on ground like in the Wildspire West rather than the desert, that's fine. We just got to be more specific about where it can live and where it can't live, and what regions can't frequent, and so on. Maybe it's because of its bulk. What I'm saying is that visually, I think it'd be better without the spikes. I think it'd be better with bigger wings. Keep the claws. Keep the claws, right? You need to keep the claws. And the reason why you need to keep the claws in the arm guards of the Sandbarioth is because if you want to use the idea that it can pound on you, right? You need to have big forearms. You just don't need it to fucking transplant elbow drop you with the giant 7-foot long spike at the end of his arm guards. You just don't need that. Because that's not what it does. It literally uses its body weight to pound over you while gliding over your head. That's what you're telling me. So it doesn't need those additional features that make it extra. If you were to improve Sandbarioth, remove the dozens upon dozens of layers of spike, make the wings bigger, you clarify the idea that it's much more aerial focused. Oh, hold on. Chat is updating. Why is it not showing chat? It's not showing in chat. That's so stupid. I see the message. It just doesn't show up in my my box. I don't get it. It's kind of dumb. Oh, maybe it had like maybe it was censored. I don't know. Sorry, mate. I can't see your message. I saw the pop up on stream. It's just the message won't pop up. Maybe it caught something, I don't know. Okay. Such. Such. I agree. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see it in chat. Sorry, I'll try again. I'll try to update the chat again. Damn it, I can't see it. I'm asking if you typed the long ass message. Unfortunately, YouTube did not allow me to see your message. Actually, it kind of does use its arm guards when it pounds you when it rides out the sandstorm. Again, keep the arm guards, right? You just don't need 12-inch spikes. I literally said, keep the arm guards. Keep it. You need it. You can't change the proportions that much. Literally, I've already said that. You don't need that. Alright, let's go over to Red Kizu. Alright, regular Kizu. Red Kizu. Okay, so what I can see is still an electrified monster. Still has lightning, electricity. What's that? 1 star to 4 gen. Still uses its tail to like charge up its electricity. Okay. I'm trying to see. The only thing that comes to my mind is that it's red, so blood. That's the only thing that comes to mind. Is blood. I see Red Kizu and all I think about is blood. I don't know. Red Kizu just kind of draws blank to me. I don't see anything in particular that I'm like, oh yeah, of course that's red for that. Because I still see electricity. Maybe it focuses more on electrical attacks and behavioral patterns, but it's just red. I don't know. I don't know, man. It's weird. I gotta look it up. Oh, mic drop. Red Kezu ecology. It is said to be the original Kezu. Loathsome wyverns that live inside the caves and you're blind to detect their prey. The red Kezu, much like its white cousin, falls into the class of flying wyvern. It is actually a normal Kezu. It's actually just a normal Kezu. Okay! Despite what is said by many, while the more common white Kezus are albinos. Oh, so what we think are normal Kezus are just albinos. Alright, I don't think there's anything else to dive deep in. If that's what the ecology tells me, right? If that's what the page tells me, is that red Kezu just the original Kezu, and original Kezu is just the albino Kezu. I mean, it's like seeing an albino pigeon in the wild. You're like seeing an albino pigeon in New York. Well, it's like one in every two pigeons in New York is albino. So unless red Kezu does something significantly different, I don't know. Immediately, the Kezu massive mouth made me think parasite. Maybe there's a correlation between the red coloring and blood. Perhaps. You know what? That's where my mind goes at. My mind went directly to blood. But it can't not be just like it's matter with blood, because you'd only see it around its mouth. Unless you say like it creates a unless you say red Kezu just dips, goes full diving into a pool of blood like every day, and it never cleanses it. That blood is dry blood on its skin, that's pretty intense, man. That's pretty hardcore. The parasite idea is a pretty good one. Again, there's nothing to me that says, oh, okay, red Kezu is interesting. I really don't. Same areas as common Kezu. Ecological niche. The red Kezu is in the same level of the food chain as the common Kezu. Makes sense. Would be weird if they were any stronger. However, due to their fat-rich bodies, they are perfect prey for other monsters. If they are a chance to kill it, it just consists of Tigrex and rare. Okay, Rathian, Rathalos, Rarajong, Akari Jeba, Kamu, and Orgaron. Nacella, Tidal, Narjala, and rare predatory Elder Dragons, interestingly. Elder Dragons on red Kezu. Okay. It's possible that red Kezu are omnivorous, as some individuals have been observed eating mushrooms in the swamps. Biological adaptation. Yep. Red Kezu's body is for the most part the same as the normal Kezu, aside from the obvious color difference. It does, however, have a lot more difference than it leads on. Has a lot more muscle mass on its body than normal Kezu, making its attacks more powerful. Muscle mass? I can definitely see that it's very goopy and fatty, right? I can see that normal Kezu is very fatty. You can definitely see the legs and the arms. Like, if this wasn't jeans, it'd have a it'd have a muffin top. Kezu would have a muffin top. Red Kezu is far more lean, but I don't know if it's because this is Monster Hunter 4 and like it's a generational engine thing where it got remodeled. But I can see that. I can definitely see that Red Kezu is far more lean. Go for Celtis Queen. Oh, I'll do Celtis Queen after. Do Rathian and Rathalos now. Pink Rathian and Rathalos? There's nothing to say about Pink Rathian and Rathalos. You can say some things about Pink Rathian and Rathalos, but it's nearly meaningless. So I don't think it's You know what? I'll do Rathian and Rathalos because, let's be honest, their subspecies are basically nothing. It's gonna take me 2 minutes to cover them. Let me keep on reading this. It is better adapted for colder regions. It is better adapted for colder regions and can even stay in them during colder seasons. What? It's better adapted for colder regions and even can stay during colder seasons, unlike Kezus. Its electrical organs are further developed as well, giving a wider variety of ways to disable and snare prey. The skin of red Kezus have strange properties due to allowing it to stretch its neck much farther than Kezu. Unusual purple blood flowing through larger veins, purple mouth, and bony humped back. Have more powerful electrical organs and new attacks technique. Well, that's rare individuals. It is better adapted for colder regions and can even stay in them during colder seasons, unlike Kezus. That sentence doesn't make sense to me. That sentence doesn't make any sense to me. If this is leaner than this, how can this lives in colder environments than this? You look at any Arctic animal ever, they either have excessive amounts of fur for isolation, excessive amounts of blubber for isolation, and if they have muscle mass like polar bear, they have a ton of fat to isolate their body heat. So red Kezu doesn't make sense. Unless you're saying that muscle is better for isolating body heat than Kezu. And if you want to say that this bitch is cold-blooded in the fucking tundra, you... What? No, that doesn't make sense. Red Kezu should be the opposite. If he's linear, he should live in hotter regions. Because that is where it would favor his larger muscle mass. It doesn't make any sense to do the opposite. That's a weird sentence. That's a very weird sentence. I think this needs to be rectified. It doesn't make any sense. From having more mass in its body, how much heavier is this? By the way, mass isn't a differentiating factor as to who can survive in the Arctic, right? A hare can survive in the Arctic if it has enough fur to isolate its body heat. It's not that much more heavy than a normal hare, it's just that it has a ton of fur to isolate its body heat. Otherwise, you'd see fucking elephants in the Arctic because they're fucking massive and weigh a ton. That's a ridiculous sentence. Doesn't make any sense. Let's do Rathian and Rathalos because they don't take any time to cover. Where are you guys? So, the reason why Pink Rathian and Azure Rathalos are very boring is, although Pink Rathian is different, quote-unquote, than normal Rathian, and so is Azure Rathalos, it's because they want to emphasize the idea of venom and fire. Right? Rathalos will always be a bigger fire user than Rathian. That's basically been encrusted in their AI. And when you think of poison or venom, you got two principal colors you're going to attach to that. You're going to attach either purple or pink. Well, that solves the issue. And if you think of fire, the main three colors you think of fire is either orange, red, or blue. Azure is a deviation of blue. Blue, hotter fire, more dangerous. There's Azure Rathalos. That's why they're the way they are. Are there better ways to signify both changes better? Yes. A better way you could do it with Pink Rathian without changing the majority of his limbs, you just add appendages. The best way that Espinas conveys that idea is by being a thorny bastard. So a better way to fix Pink Rathian, keep the pink, that's fine. You can keep the pink, that's a better representation of venomous than its normal counterpart. But what you can do is you can add way more spikes. This is a case where you can add way more spikes and it fits, and it fit much better. As if to say, hey, I'm dangerous, don't touch me. Just make sure you learn the idea that it's extremely venomous, right? Extremely venomous. Just convey that idea as best as you can. Pink Rathian doesn't do that. Exact same physiology. This needed one or two additional elements to convey that better. And Azure Rathalos, unfortunately, carries the problem that Silver Rathalos fixes the problem that Azure has. Silver Rathalos, when entering Hellfire mode, looks like better Azure Rathalos than Azure Rathalos. Why? Because Hellfire actually glows inside of him, right? Most of these can just be aesthetic changes. without changing large majorities of their limbs, but they go a long way to signify what is more powerful, what is better. Want to fix Azure Rathlos? Too bad. Silver Rathlos did it, so you had to copy off of Silver Rathlos. Now let's do Selphus Queen. Selphus. Oh. Oh. I like this. Okay. It's a shame that the renders of Monster Hunter 4 aren't that good because it's made on a 3DS. Damn. Damn. Look at that. Okay. So it's like an insect on top of, You know what this looks like? Oh, nope, 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 absolutely not. Absolutely not. How about chill Sonic music? Perfect. Where were we? No, I don't need that. Okay. You know what this looks like? This looks like, that girl in Dark Souls, where bottom half spider, top half human. Kind of looks like that, gotta be honest. This looks bottom half monster, top half insect. Look at their ecology. I will. Selphus Queen ecology. Unable to fly themselves, their wingless female male opportunity release pheromones to lure in the male service of thralls. Selphus Queen possess extremely heavy carapace, but their mucus-spewing maw is vulnerable when exposed. Gotcha. Very large neoportron with the female counterpart of Selphus. Okay, so that's just the male, and that's the female. Perfect example of sexual dimorphisms, closely related. There's a closely related subspecies that lives within the harsh confines of the dunes. Okay, so Selphus Queen and Desert Selphus Queen, pretty self-explanatory. That one lives in the desert, that one doesn't. That's what I get from this. Okay, let's continue. Selphus Queens are largely highly opportunistic predators and have a high position in the food chain. Why are they opportunistic predator? Why wouldn't they just leave the male to do the job like most insectoid hierarchy does? Interesting. Herbivores such as Renflo's Garka are common prey, but other animals like Gendrome, Yankutkut, Kwacha, and Great Jaggy may find themselves in the risk of being eaten. Even still isn't safe from a female's hunger. Okay, so what I'm getting here is that the female are the one that are hunting. Right? That's what I get from this. The known competitors of the giant insect consist of Xenogres, Gore, Magala, Brachydia. Oh, so it's an upper echelon monster, but with an incredibly tough exoskeleton, powerful grasping forearms, mercurius balls, and extremely large and deadly tail pincers that are forced to be reckoned with. Gotcha. These creatures are the largest known species of Neopitron to date. In fact, they are so heavy that whenever they walk the ground, they will shake. Selphus Queen have massive and powerful legs that end with the claws. These powerful limbs are not only enable the giant insect to climb up rocky, uneven terrain of that of the heaven's mouth, but greatly make the task of boring easy. Larger pieces of tail only may use for defense, but can be used as another limb for both grabbing objects and prey alike. In its tails, they are a specialized organ that produce pheromone that send a Selphus flying to a female's exact location. When the male is within range, a female could quickly grab it by injecting a special pheromone-like substance that causes the male to cease struggling. The male is then under the female's complete control and will do whatever she requires of him. If in battle, both male and female will fight as one. This makes finding the deadly Selphus Queen even deadlier, as the two Neopitrons will fight as one. Selphus Queen is also capable of spitting balls as high-pressure watery mucus from its mandibles to shoot down and injure prey. Leading a mainly solitary life, Selphus Queen will only seek out company as Selphus is needed, if needed, whether it be food, mating, transportation, or added protection. As Selphus Queen won't hesitate in releasing her specialized pheromones to ban a male at will. Ooh, Sibs! Interesting. Amazingly, if in battle in dire need of sustenance, a Celtis Queen does not hesitate in violently killing and then eating her male counterpart to survive. So a little bit of praying mantis in there. I get a pretty good gist of what is happening with the Celtis Queen. They live alone, which is an interesting conundrum. I thought they'd have a swarm of normal Celtis, like constantly around them at all time, as in most insect hierarchies. I thought they'd live in group, but they don't. I guess it's because they're so large, right? They're so top-heavy that they shake the ground when moving, and they're such high tiers in the food chain. It's kind of interesting. It's a deviation. Let's look at its subspecies. Motion blur really kills it. Like, it changes positions from there to top. It really feels like it's two insects put together. Oh, sorry, just that is the Celtis Queen, and just that is the Celtis. Oh, okay. Okay, I understand. I understand now. So the bottom part is just the Celtis Queen, and like the thing inside the mandibles is the Celtis. The male one. Okay, alright. I can roll with that. So what is different about the desert variation? Let's see. I want to know what's different, because right now I see still spikes on the forearms. The markings are different. This looks almost scarred, right? This almost looks scarred on the forelimbs. Oh, I look at this, and this is very pattern heavy, as if it's trying to camouflage, which I find interesting. Ecology. Let's go to a largely and highly opportunistic predator to have high position and moving chain, blah blah blah. Isn't that the same thing? You also have to deal with Diabolus and Monoblos, a bit higher question, but a high, incredibly tough skeleton buff aggressive. Okay, so same. Further with the arguments of the dudes, is the Celtic Queens have a thick shell with colors that look much like the sand of the desert. So it is just coloration change to help camouflage. I understand. Makes sense. Opportunistic predator wants to stay quiet and jump in on spray fairly quickly. I get that. Desert Celtis Queen have larger pincers on their tail and are much longer than the other species. Do they? They do! They really do! Okay. Immediately that tells me that it's a more back-heavy focused creature. Doesn't spend that much time wasting attacking with its front limbs. Wow. Uses that much more time to spend with its claws and talons. I think I'm getting to that part. Hold on. This is due to them using the pincer to pull out sleeping desert Celtis on the sand and forcing them to fly alongside of them. As they pull the Celtis on the sand, they will inject a special pheromone-like substance that will cause melt to cease struggling. Substance will put it... So, it's quite praying mantis-like. I'll tell you what I really like about the base design version. Those claws, man. They're fantastic. They really remind me of praying mantis' sight. But we're not here to talk about just the ecology, we're here to talk about how it's visually differently supported and how you would change such a character design. So, let's take a look at that way. Desert, coloration, matching pattern. Alright. If it has a coloration change, then I get it. You want to better fit in your environment. Opportunistic predator makes sense that you want to camouflage within your environment. Totally get that. How about the patterns, though? There are patterns on its shell to effectively try and camouflage maybe. What would be the reasoning behind having patterns on your body? You could do it for display purposes, mating purposes, although she doesn't need it because she has pheromones that can attract males instantly, and she kills them anyway. So she has no need to use display as a mean of mating. So no need for the markings for that purpose. So that removes it immediately. Perhaps it is, perhaps it's a legacy evolution thing, right? Where they evolve in a different region, but they still have the legacy of having those remaining elements on their bodies. But issue with that, the normal one doesn't have those markings. So what are those markings for? Yeah, you know what I mean? Oh, what the hell? Okay, no, where am I? There. So what are those markings for? It can be for perhaps intimidation purposes, but she doesn't need that specifically for her mate. Maybe she needs it for her prey. Although that... Oh, maybe she uses the marking as perhaps like illusions, right? Maybe the Desert Saltest Queen uses those markings on her forelimbs and her like skull head, right? To essentially attract like passing prey. So like they're attracted to come closer, you know, like what's the animal that has like a worm-like tentacle in its mouth, so like it can snatch on the prey that comes close to eat the worm? That's what I'm thinking. That's what the pattern is, because it can be for camouflage, because sand is equally just sand. You don't have differentiation. Maybe you have a rock standing every now and then, so I think this is what the pattern matching is. The males has 2 horns. After Celtic we can do the ecology of Elder Dragons. Unfortunately, I think I'm gonna end it after this one. Snapping turtle. Thank you. Right? I think that's what it is. I haven't read thus far in the ecology, or at least I don't see anything thus far in the text that tells me its ecology is using its patterns to do that. So I like that idea a lot. I like the idea a lot that it uses the markings, because it can be for camouflage. You're in desert. There's sand everywhere. Sand is just sand equally. There's no malformation or shapes that looks like rocks that have brownish features. So makes sense that you keep the coloration of sand, but you use the markings to perhaps attract prey because it's opportunistic. I like this idea a lot. That's a good change. It's a simple change too, because Celtis, normal Celtis, would live in foresty environment, I presume. And this one lives in the desert. Yeah, I like that. How do you make it better? Okay, so if we run into this idea, this concept that they're crueler, right? That the desert variation is that much more crueler. It's unbelievably merciless. All right. How do we make that more impressive, more powerful, a bigger visual indicator of its danger? Okay. My mind immediately goes to classic depictions of double face. So, when you're thinking of a monster that is revealing itself, right? I think of something like a mask. Puts on a mask. How about if it uses also those markings to entice prey? How about you fake facial features at the top of their head? So you can clearly see that the eyes are below the exoplate of their skulls, right? With mandibles below. That's their real face. How about you put markings on the top bottom of their skull to have second facial features, in the same vein that most masked enemies work. I'll give you an example, yeah? Perhaps an explanation is in order. Alright. I think this is I think you're gonna understand a little bit better what I mean once you see this, okay? So this is a new flavor from Picurus Uprising, right? Picurus Uprising. Amazing game, by the way, on 3DS. This is actually its real eyes. This is a fake facial feature. This isn't its real face. This is its real eye. Invert those, right? Make that face, not necessarily that face, but facial features at the top of their head, and make its real facial features at the bottom of their head on the Desert Celtis Queen. So give me some facial features at the top of that skull, right by the markings, and something right below to entice prey. Doubling, you know, make him enticing for predators. I think that's how you improve Desert Celtis Queen. You go wild with that idea. You go even more into it entices. I'll continue reading just to be sure. This substance will put the Desert Celtis in complete control and do whatever she requires of him. Oh, so it's also like a puppeteering type of animal. So, like, completely subdues the Celtis male, Desert Celtis male, into its mandibles to do whatever it wants. So it's like puppetry now. Interesting. I don't know how the normal Celtis Queen behaves, because it looks like far much more cooperation from this render than this render. Let's be honest. But if that's that idea, my immediate thought is, can Desert Celtis Queen like produce silk or any kind of thread to mimic puppetry? Immediately my mind goes to that. Why? Because that's immediately a bigger signifier that something is under control that shouldn't be. Immediately. Perhaps this is something that this render just can't show because it's something done in action. I don't know. Immediately, that's what my mind goes to as signifiers as to how to better communicate that idea visually. In both battle, if in battle, both the male and female will fight as one. This makes fighting the deadly Celtis Queen even deadlier as two and will fight as one. The Celtis Queen can also spit out balls of high-pressure watery mucus from their mandibles, so that it injure prey. Spitballs of high-pressure watery mucus. So essentially, okay. I can spit that does the same thing. Just like Celtis Queen, however, they do something unique with their mucus. She has an attack known as the Guild, the Super Beetle Cannon. Alright. This attack is performed by using a Desert Celtis by firing highly compressed substance with great force to attack threats with. Sure, this force sends a Desert Celtis flying at target at great speeds before the Celtis explode into pieces on impact. Okay, here's another idea. If they don't produce silk, right? Super Beetle Cannon. Okay, here's an idea, right? They don't produce silk. Alright, what's another signifier way to say something maybe is affected by something? And you say that their pheromones are way stronger. Okay, here's my pitch. How about you have a cloud veil of pheromones that she can produce, and it's like a mist that she can shoot out, yeah? How about like a mist around the Desert Queen Celtis that can basically shoot out a cloud of pheromones that can basically affect and enrage the Desert Celtis male nearby, and essentially like make it work forward like a parasite? How about it like infects the Desert Celtis by making like, let's say the mist it produces, the pheromones it produces, are purple in coloration, because that's what I'm thinking too. Color of corruption, color of evil. Yeah, just purple, right? Or even yellow. Could say the pheromones are yellow, right? Make those pheromones yellow, like puff out of holes from the Desert Celtis Queen, like a veil. And then keep that veil around as the Desert Celtis is around, so it sits in that poisonous pheromone, mind-controlling pheromone, and then show me that she has like blowholes that she can blow those holes that mist out of. They do it by shooting out a veil of mist, of pheromones. Because from what I'm hearing, and from what I'm reading, right, it's they inject it. It's the color stench. They do that. Okay, alright. I don't think I can reasonably find another way to improve the Desert Celta screen as it is. I've basically spent 20 minutes just fumbling about, and this is the conclusion I came to. So, alright. That's pretty cool. Alright, guys. I didn't want to go over 2 hours, unfortunately. And I did. So, my mistake. This was an experiment for me. Yeah, they do also inject it too. This is it for me, guys. This was an experiment of a stream, right? It's the first time I did a fairly scripted stream like this, where I had a PowerPoint presentation. I offered you my points, and afterwards we go into talking about how to improve subspecies. I look at examples and debating how it complies with the ecology and contextual circumstances it's applied to. I'm glad I got to do this above my normal shorts, because 60 seconds isn't enough to talk about certain factors that I would normally talk about, which sometimes can, most of the times, get taken out of context in my shorts. So I appreciate if you spend here your time and you talked it over. I'm glad we had this time to talk it over. Even if we disagreed on some points, it's fine. That's what discussion is about. That's what opinions are about. That's what debating is about. I'm in my point, I'm in my context, I'm in my limitations. You're welcome to refute. You're welcome to say your own, as long as we do it in a fairly respectable manner, which I believe we did accomplish today. I'm not going to do other dragons, although if you like to see more, guys, if you like to see more of this kind of stream where we talk over a certain subject and debate over that, and talk about the ecology and stuff, we can do that. I'm interested in doing one for variants, rare species, deviants, apexes, you know, that kind of stuff. Very interested in doing that, okay? Very interested in doing that, but I'll do it if I see there's some interest over it. So, that is me. I'm gonna close it out because my camera is dying. Thank you for coming over, everybody. Take care of yourself, alright? Have a wonderful evening, a wonderful morning, a wonderful afternoon, and everything in between. I hope y'all will be just fine as it is right now, and y'all have a fantastic day. I'll see you next time, everybody.